CSS-replicate-more-flex. I've already got it open, but it is this. So using CSS to replicate a simple flex-based layout in a file flex.html, if I open it up, it is currently empty. Create the bare bones structure for a full page web page based on the layout described below. I think there's just an error with this README because it's meant to display page.png, which is this one. And reading through the rest, as a challenge exercise, we want to create 5 boxes within the main section of the page that follows the following specifications. And these specifications, yeah, we just have to follow them, but how it should look is like this. So pretty much page.png with 5 extra boxes inside. So before I get stuck into coding, how do you reckon I would structure how to lay out my divs and where to nest my divs in order to make this replicate this design?
I reckon that the first sort of side panel, and then so everything, the side panel on the left and then everything on the right are the sort of first children of the body. And then for everything on the right, you've got 2, 3 children.
Excuse the scuffed paint, but I'll be using that to illustrate. But Mitchell, is what you're saying is essentially this will be. I need to do a fill. This will be the first. Okay, this isn't working. What if I change this to that? Does that work? Okay, that works. So this will be the first portion. The first child of the body is what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
And the second one is going to be, oh no, uh-oh. And the second one is going to be this one, correct? Yep, that's how I would do it. And so because there's nothing in the leftmost column, I'm just going to ignore that for now. And so on the rightmost column, we can see that, so how do we structure divs inside the rightmost column once we've split it down in half? Any takers? All good. So previously the direct children of the body, which again, to point it out, are these two. They're arranged in a flex direction row. So they're flexing in the direction a row would go, like horizontally as opposed to vertically. So if we were to look at the rightmost column, which is just this one, so I'm going to block. I can't change it. Okay, I'm going to block this one out because we don't care about that. But looking at the rightmost column, paint is not cooperating. But if we look at the rightmost column, we can see that there are 3 kind of containers that are contained within the rightmost column. There are the 200 pixel high row divs that span the entire width, and there is one bigger container. So to illustrate these, this would be that. So these are the different rows, and this would be the large container. So inside the rightmost column, what you could do is you could then put 3 divs inside that rightmost column and have the flex direction now be vertical as opposed to horizontal, which it was in the first layer, let's say. So that's everything done for the right column, kind of. Again, we can see that the 100 pixel high rows have no children inside them. So we can ignore these and focus on the last part, which is this body container thing, this main container. So this looks familiar, right? This looks very much like the very first entire body. If I switch to it, we can see that the page in its entirety is structured in left container and right container, and the same thing happens with the main body container. However, the widths will be different, and so we will have to use different classes for that. So this is kind of stating the obvious, but let's go with it anyway. The final container is going to be split into two divs. That one, the pink one, and the gold one, the orange one. And there you go. That's the breakdown. And it's cool. So once we've analyzed it, let's get started with like coding it up. So currently this is what it looks like. There's absolutely nothing in here. I'm refreshing, and we expect that because there is nothing in here anyway. So you guys might have covered this in the lectures or the previous week's tutorials. But for boilerplate HTML code, what tags do we need and what content is required in them, firstly?
The doc type?
Mm-hmm.
The
Yep.
doc type?
Yeah, that's correct. So the doc type, it autofilled, but the doc type is there to just define essentially what it says, define what type of document it is, and we specify that it is a HTML file. So it allows whatever web page is interpreting it, whatever browser is interpreting it to understand that it's HTML. Cool. What else? I need to turn off Copilot. It's making it too straightforward. Cool. So kind of gave it away, but the next tag we need to encompass everything else is the HTML tags. There's one attribute that we should add to the HTML tag for accessibility reasons. You guys might not know what it is, but any guesses? So the attribute that we need is lang. So language, essentially, as the tooltip says, define the language of the element, and it essentially it's better for accessibility, which you'll cover in later weeks, because it allows screen readers and other accessibility tools to be able to essentially understand what language is used on the web page, so that people with disabilities have an easier time comprehending what's going on. So EN is a language. I think it's essentially a locale, but we'll just go with EN for now. Cool. So inside HTML, what other tags do we need? I think there's just two that I'm thinking of.
Head and body.
Yep. Yes, you're close with header, but Mitchell was correct in that it's head and body. Header is actually, let me get to that in a bit. Let me just write these down. So a header is actually a semantic HTML tag. So what that means is, I guess this is content you come in for, but semantic HTML essentially acts as landmarks for any screen readers or website parsers, so that when they see a header, it's like, oh, this is the header. This is most likely going to contain links to other parts of the website, or contain the title of the web page or the brand. Complementary to header, there's also footer. Again, this is another piece of semantic HTML. And again, you'll cover this later, but using headers and footers are better than using divs with a class of header or footer, respectively, purely because headers and footers and other pieces of semantic HTML are there to act as landmarks. And you can apply styles directly to HTML tags anyway, so it doesn't really make much difference. So you might as well use semantic HTML. Cool, enough about that. What goes inside the head tag? There's a whole bunch. Let's just name two that we, let's just name three things. One essential thing and two more non-essential items. Yep, I'll make the words bigger.
Title.
Yep, so title is a non-essential one, but it is good to have it there. So flex. Also, yes, it's all good. We'll hit it alone. So more-flex is our title. Title is a tag that essentially defines what is displayed when you look at it in a tab in the browser. So it's called more-flex now. If I go to the browser, currently it's I can't really increase the size of the text in the title of the tab, but currently it's flex HTML because I haven't refreshed it. If I refresh it, it is now more-flex because that's where the title tag is used. Cool. So that's one of the three. We still need one essential one and one less necessary one.
Feel bad that I'm the only one answering questions here, but you can use meta tags, so viewport and device width, and the child set, stuff like that.
Yes, yes. Those two, oh, you answered both of the, okay, there were technically four things that you could have added that would have like made it a complete head thing. I just like left out one because I didn't think people would like get all of them, but yeah, you got them. So those are the two meta tags. I'll write them down in a bit, but we still need one more essential thing. If we are applying styles to our HTML, what do we need?
The link to the style sheet.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. If we are applying styles to our HTML, then we need some way of like supplying the HTML, the CSS that we specify. You can do that inline, but in all honesty, that's disgusting. Don't consider doing that. It just makes things very hard to read. So what we do instead is have an external file that defines all our CSS for us. And I'll do that in a bit after I write this boilerplate. Keep in mind that once you do this, once you do this one time, you don't need to like write it. Well, again, you can just really copy and paste from whatever HTML document you've written before. So linking a style sheet is pretty important because you'll be using that to put everything together. You'll be also using that to bring in fonts that you'll be using. If I want to illustrate this, Google fonts. Okay, let's say we use Roboto, and I just select this one. We can see, oh, I zoomed in too much, but we can see that the links, this is what we need to copy in and put into our head tag in order for us to actually use the fonts in our CSS. Say if we didn't do this and in our CSS we specified that we want to use Roboto font, it doesn't know what the hell it is, so it's just going to display its fallback, which in this case is sans serif. Cool. Back to this, link relationship is style sheet, and I think I have created a CSS right here. So href is equal to flex.css. Cool. So we finally getting around to like actually building the main body. So going off what I said earlier, the first child is going to be split into two, going horizontal, and so let's do that first. Yeah, let's do this first. So div class, let's call it left column. You can probably find better names, but we'll just go with this for now. Div class right column. Pretty straightforward. I'm not going to apply CSS until I've fleshed out the layout. So right column, left column is empty, as we can see. So all we need to do is add more children to our rightmost column. And as we can see, or if you guys remember, our rightmost column has 3 children that we defined. The 200 height divs and the big container thingy. So let's do that. Cool. I'm going to call the 100 height rows just rows, row, not rows, and nothing's going to be inside them. And let's call this main container, I guess. Cool. So currently, also the spacing in terms of white space is not necessary. I'm just formatting it like this so it's easier to see essentially what's going on. Otherwise, it's just going to be all compacted together and not very nice to look at. So row, main container, and row. Again, rows are empty. The only element that has children in it is going to be the main container, and it's going to be 2 things side by side. So let's do that quickly. So apologies if you hear any traffic noise. Class is equal to I know we have a main container and we have a body, but let's just call it body container. Right, let's confuse everyone. Again, if you have better names, please do suggest them. I kind of threw this together very quickly. So class is equal to, so that's the main left container, and then the right container, because it's a column and it's inside the main container, let's call it MC right column. Cool. So that's everything that we need. Before I apply any CSS, I'm going to go in here, apply some styles to the body. And apply some styles to all divs. In order to make it kind of look like the page, I'm just going to apply a border. Have you guys covered using shorthand in CSS? What I mean by shorthand is instead of specifying border, color, and then border style, and then border width, you can do it all in one. Do you guys know about that? Yeah, Serena, thank you. We can condense everything. We condense 3 lines into one. We can just do border 1px solid black. I think 1px might be too small, so let's do 2. And if we go to our page and refresh, we can see it's just a huge black blob. Why is that? So if we go into our console, get rid of this, and open up our body to inspect, we can see that all our divs exist. Well, hopefully they exist. But they're all just piled on top of one another. And we can see that left column, hella thin, right column, hella thick, because right column has a lot of child elements, and everything is as we expect, except for the actual proportions, because we actually haven't applied anything to them yet. Also, before we get into that, do we know the different units that are used in in CSS? I think the most common are obviously pixels. Can a few people chuck like 2 or 3 more? Damn. You see it going hard. There's potential percentages, CM, EM, PT. In this case, do we know what VH and VW are? Cool. Good question, Kaden. View height and view width. So essentially, view height and view width means, well, rather than view height and view width, it's kind of like, it's better to think of it like percentage of viewport height or width. So I hate running comments in CSS, but VH is kind of, oh, okay, well, there you go. Can be thought of as a percentage of viewport heights, and same for VW, but for width. So this allows us to be more dynamic responsive in terms of how we size our elements, because if I do say 95% instead, I think what will happen is the width will only go up to the size of the elements, if I am not mistaken. Oh, no, it just goes like that. Okay. Weird. Maybe it's the HTML. Cool. Well, that's a nice surprise. But sometimes you might run into bugs. Wait, okay. I think I didn't change the correct one. I did. Okay, let's have a look now. Cool. So we can see that the body is just as high as the elements are stacked up on top of each other. And the reason why that is, I can only postulate really, is because most of the time you're able to like scroll vertically, right? So there's actually no defined, well, okay. One of the reasons probably is because HTML body is encapsulated within a HTML tag. And I don't believe HTML has an intrinsic height value associated with it. And because its children inherit height, if you give a child, in this case, body, 100% height, what is it 100% of? Because the parent of the body is HTML, right? And HTML doesn't have a inherent associated height value. So if there's no height value, if it's an undefined value, what's 100% of undefined? Undefined, right? So in this case, sometimes people use VH to define height. It's not really recommended because then it constrains it to like one single screen and makes it hella constrictive. But in this context, it's fine because we are just dealing with a single screen kind of small exercise. Usually you would just let your content dictate, as in you would just let the contents of your web page dictate the height. So you don't really need to worry about that. Cool. Any questions about that? Is that kind of clear?
Is that sort of like something that would be useful for us for task 1 on assignment 1 to like constrain the dimensions for that little image?
Yes, I will get around to that after we finish this. I don't think I will. Actually, I think I can do the challenge with you guys pretty quickly after I apply all the CSS. So moving this back to BH and divs like that. Cool. So let's look at the requirements. Let me open this on the side as well. Cool. So page, left column, right column. Left column has a width of 15% of that total thing, which is the body in our case. And it also has a min width of 100 pixels. So left column, what is it? Width, 15%. Min width, I can't spell. Cool. Cool. I forgot to do one thing, and that is if I do width and min width and apply styles to the right column as well, it's still going to display vertically. That's because I haven't applied display flex to the body just yet. So I need to do that. Display flex, and then flex direction is going to be row because it's going horizontally, right? Left column is width, 15%, min width, 100 pixels, and I think is always going to have to be 100%. Cool. And then right column. Cool. Okay. All right. So this is a little bit of a conundrum. And I will demonstrate why in a bit after I write this down. Yeah, no, that's all we need for now. Cool. So let's have a look at what this looks like. All right. Sweet. So the leftmost column has the correct styles applied to it. Width 15%, min width is 100 pixels, and height is 100%. And yep, it is height 100%. So does anybody have any ideas as to how we get the right column to completely fill out the remaining part of the body? And the remaining part of the body is whatever is purple there. Flex is equal to 1. I actually don't know what that does. Let's try it out. This is equal to 1. Cool. Well, that was straightforward. Thanks, Yandong. An alternative I was going to suggest was flex grow. And then you assign it some absurd value like 100. And this will do the same thing. I should probably comment this out so you can see that I haven't just not refreshed the page. So this is what it looks like normally. And I uncomment this and save. Yeah. So either works. Let's go with flex is equal to 1 because this looks a lot nicer than flex grow is equal to 100. Cool. So flex is a 1. And then let's have a look at the things on the inside, and that which are these. Let me collapse this. So we need to define the CSS for row and then define the CSS for main container. I think row is 100 pixels. Yep. So row is height pixels and width. What value would we give width, or how would we make row extend all the way across? Well, it kind of does that already. If we look at the code, and not look at the code, look at the browser, it kind of does that already. But I guess what I wanted to bring up with this point before realizing that it was kind of a moot point was, like I said before, height and width and a whole bunch of other values are inherited by an element's children. So in this case, row is a child of right column. And so right column's width or height is going to be passed down to row and its siblings as kind of like reference points for what 100% will be. So if we give row width 100%, like Yang Dong suggested, it will be 100% of right column's width, which makes sense, right? So let's just define it explicitly. I think that should be good. And then main container, what do we give main container? Let's say width %. And let's leave it like that for now. Cool. So if I refresh, the rows look good, but main container, bit of a pickle. What do we do? What extra style do we need to add to main container?
Need to give it a height.
Yep. But so there's a few ways we can do this. We can give it a height, which is calculated. There's a CSS function that is, I butchered that spelling. That is calc. What happens here is it does a mathematical evaluation, and then it basically converts between different units of measurement. So you could do something like 100 pixels minus 2 rem, for instance. Yep, we could also do 100%. Sorry, 100. Yeah, 100% minus, I think you meant 200 because that's the height of the rows. But we could just do what we did earlier and remember that right column is a flex. I forgot to define this actually. Display flex direction column. So it's a flex container, it's a flex box again. So we can do what we did previously with the right column and just do flex one. And I think this works. Yep. Easy. So that is main container. And then to finish off the rest, hopefully quickly, what else do we need to do to expand this? I need to take care of these. So body container. Then MC right. Before I forget, let's explicitly define main container to be a flexbox. Cool. So body container, which is the main part. Why don't I need to add flex for the row? Because cool. So row has a defined height, which is 100 pixels. And in the context of the big right column, it is flexed vertically, right? So so therefore we'd only need to apply flex is equal to 1 for the main container, because that has like a height that is based upon the height of the right column and really nothing else. So in that case, because it's a set height, we can just apply height is equals 100 pixels to row and not apply height to main container and just do flex 1. If you mean why don't we add display flex to row, that's because there's no real need to. You can, it doesn't really change anything because there are no children inside row, which we need to address. So body container, if we look at the reference, right column is the width of the green line. And so the main container is 70%, 70% of the green line's width, and the MC right column is 30%. So that's pretty straightforward. Width 70%, 5%. Let's leave it like that. And similarly with 30% height. So hopefully this looks correct. And I think it does. I hope. I think that looks about right. I don't know about you guys. Let's actually test if the leftmost column actually has a minimum width associated with it, and if the right side just like shrinks, but the left side doesn't. So to do that, I think in 5 in Chrome. Yeah, okay. Control-Shift-M. And then, as we can see, the width of body decreases, so makes it nice and everything. And I'm decreasing, and we can see the left column is still decreasing, but at a certain point around here, yeah, so it's decreasing at around here. It stays static because it's at, okay. All right, you can barely see it, but if we look at the bottom here, it's like 100. The width is 100, which stays consistent with our min width. And if I continue decreasing, the left column doesn't change. So our specifications have been met. Cool. Any questions before we quickly do the challenge exercise? Does this work for a full screen setup? Let's try. Yeah. Is this what you mean? I think it does, at least. Ah, right. Cool. Yeah. Yep. The two rows remain consistent in height, and if I just like do this, it just messes up. Change the window height. Thought height is 100%. Is there an easy way to make the stroke weight consistent on the lines? No, unless you want to do a whole bunch of pseudo classes for like nth child of or something like that. Or if you want to really get granular with changing the borders of specific classes, which isn't really the point of the exercise. So I will not. But what do you mean, Jimmy, by you thought height is equal to 100% of the parents' heights? For which elements are you referring to? The middle container. You mean this one? Cool. I think, okay, so if we look at the, okay, so this middle bit is height 100% of, cool, so, actually, I think because, okay, so we can see that main container has an associated height in like the little speech bubble on the top left. That's width by height. So it actually has a defined height. But if we look at body, it also has a defined height because it's like 95% of the viewport width. Yeah, exactly what you said. It flexes with the whole height, and then it changes dynamically, and then we can 100% that. We can just sample that. But if we refer back to the previous example of 95% of height, 95% for body, there's no, I think HTML just like, HTML has its height defined by its contents, and its contents are body, because there's like no higher element than HTML. It doesn't really have an associated height either. Cool. Any other questions with regard to that? We'll use pixel values in assignment 1. I'll do okay. Judging off previous terms, that is run hard coding in assignment 1 where there are no responsive requirements is 100% fine. So you can use pixel values in assignment 1 if there are no responsive requirements. Otherwise, you'll have to use other responsive units of measurement, such as percentages. Okay, cool. Let's quickly do the challenge. The challenge is to have these 5 boxes inside and, oh man. Have a minimum width of 200 pixels, maximum width of 300 pixels, occupy as much space as possible. Otherwise, overflow into the next line if there are too many in a row, and have a gap of 5 pixels. So the first 2, pretty straightforward. I'll just do those quickly. Occupy as much space as possible. Otherwise, I think that's already covered by these because there's already like maximum and minimum widths associated with it. My question to you guys is, what CSS properties would we assign in order to get the 4th thing? And an immediate answer, that's correct, Jimmy. We do use flex wrap to do that. And the last one, there are 2 values that we could do, although I prefer one of them. That's going to be, is gap a value attribute? I've never seen that before. I've actually always just used margin. Oh man. Yeah, okay, that's it. All right, let's use that instead. Cool. So here we are in the wrong one. Oh, I moved it over. Cool. So all we need to do is just put 5 divs inside. Div class box. Cool. And then this doesn't look great. Yep, just looks like a big thick line. Let's change that. Body box. Let's move this down. Uh-oh. And define some. Oh, damn. Yeah. Using selectors and pseudo classes and a good time. So definitely welcome CSS properties that make things easier, and gap definitely seems like one of them. So display flex direction row. As we can see, it's not really going vertically, it's going horizontally. And flex wrap. I did a colon. I should have done a semicolon. Cool. Body box, min width, pixels, max width, pixels. Yeah. Height. There's no defined height, so let's just say 100 pixels. Not going to look great, but it's going to fit the requirements. So cool. That's full screen. I probably should use margins on either side. Does this work? Okay, Mitchell, I've never used gap before, so unfortunately I might need to get a hand.
Yeah, I think it only does the internals, it doesn't do the outside border. That's my understanding.
Okay.
So if you give it like, I think you apply it to the container, not to the body box. I can't remember where you put it.
Right, okay. Oops. Yep, that looks about correct. Actually, what is happening? Why
I
is
think you still need to put like, is it margin or padding for the body box so that the outside edges are stepped in? Because it's sort of,
I think
usually in a design you wouldn't have a border that you're trying to like accentuate, if that makes
no,
sense.
you're right. Okay. Okay. Not the most. Okay, good point. But we're running out of time, and there's like one issue that's kind of bugging me, and it is the width is staying constant. Do you guys see that? It's not changing at all, and I have no idea why. Min width is 200 pixels. Maximum width is 300. Let's just say flex. Oh, okay. Well, there we go. Well, that was a change that was required. So yeah, we actually need to apply flex to the individual child boxes in order to get it to be responsive. But otherwise, are there any questions with this exercise? No? All good? Okay. I definitely don't think we have time to finish the next exercise, which is more pertinent to assignment 1, which is to replicate a website hero image section. What I will do, however, is show you something that will probably help in getting you to like compare things without having to alt tab. I actually don't know why it's called hero. My assumption was because it's like the first thing you see and it's the primary like banner, which is why it's called hero. Good question though. I might have a look like later today to see what's going on. Cool. All right, I wanted to tell you guys about how you can make it easier to compare things, and I will do that. So index.html. Okay, let me just copy all this boilerplate code. Let me get rid of this. CSS. Exercise 2. Okay, so in this case, our image is defined as having 1896 by 870 pixels. So we can just directly put that in if we're going for like 1-to-1-ness. So width is 1896 pixels. Height is 870. Oh, yep, 1896 by 870. Cool. Margin 0. Reason why I do margin 0 is because I think body comes with an inherent margin of 8 pixels for whatever reason. So margin 0 is just there to stop that from happening. Cool. So let me refresh. It's called exercise 2, and body, if I extend it, say 2000 by 1000, body is going to be just part, and it's going to be defined as 1896 by 870. So one thing that we can do is to just make it easier, just change your responsive dimensions to the dimensions given, which is that 1896 by 870. And then another thing you can do, and you actually get around to like constructing the HTML page and doing the CSS, is you can do background image. And how do we use background image? If I remember correctly, it's URL, and then you give it a relative path to whatever image you're using. So you're comparing it to page.jpg. So this would be page.jpg. I think this should display. Yeah. So, okay. Let me just say you can't submit this. You can't submit this as your assignment 1. But what you can do is you can use this as a reference. So because what you can do in your when you're like working on it is you can just go into your inspect element and then deselect the style that defines the background image, and you can reselect it and you can just toggle between. Another thing you can do is you can do background. Oh man, what was the opacity? What's the value for opacity? Okay, I think you got to do a bit more HTML action. But cool. So let me show you how to do that. Overlay, opacity, 0.2. Cool. So okay, so you'll have 2 divs. One div is going to be like your main. True. One div would be like the div that you're working on. So let's say, hello, I'm your working div. Let's give it a class absolute. And the second div is going to be your overlay div. So let's give it overlay. And what absolute does is it allows you to do position absolute, which basically makes it a fixed part of your screen and it doesn't really move around. And what that also allows you to do is it allows you to put things on top of each other, layer things. So that's what we're going to do to just make things easier for us to see. So absolute position, yep, absolute top 0, left 0. I think this works. Let's try it. Oh, okay. Overlay is just not appearing, and that is because I haven't defined the height and width. Oh, there you go. Does that kind of make it clear? Like, okay, you can barely see what's going on, but if I zoom in more, you can see that hello, I'm your working div, which is where you're going to be like doing all your work, is like displayed on top of your overlay div, which you can just turn on and off to compare. You can up the opacity if you want to make things like a bit clearer. I think yeah. So the overlay div is laid on top because HTML is a top to bottom. It reads it from top to bottom. So so it means whatever is placed first is going to be placed underneath whatever comes next. That's just how it is. And yeah, I hope this helps you guys for your assignment 1. And that's, I think, about as much time I have for questions, I'm afraid. But do you guys have any questions about anything in general?